Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is my colleague, Forbes staff writer Zach Everson. Zach, thanks so much for coming on.
Hey, Brittany, thanks for having me back.
You're reporting the amount of money that Senator Elizabeth Warren made in book payments while in office, and the number really is tremendous. So first, how much did she make?
Sure, $4.6 million while in office from book payments, and that's well above what she made in her $174,000 a year day job. So that is spread out over 10 years of financial disclosures.
That's an incredible amount of money, but let's run it back a little further, maybe a decade ago. She was elected to Senate in 2012, but tell us about her career before holding public office. Did she write books then?
Yes, and she's still making money from them. She's drawing, I think it's about $26,000 a year is what she's still making for books she wrote before joining the Senate. Several of them had to do with textbooks regarding secured credit, U.S. bankruptcy code, kind of what she rose to fame on. And then a few more were kind of targeted more towards the mass market, where they got into like the financial struggles of the middle class. And so they're still bringing some money in from those, but it looks like of late, her time in the Senate, the money she's been making is mostly from books that she's written while in office.
And while in office, what are those books about?
There was her memoir, and then she's done, which was the first one, A Fighting Chance, and then there've been three more books. The most recent one was called Pinky Promises, which was a children's book that came out in 2021.
She's written quite a few books, both before she was elected and thereafter. How much is she making now in royalties?
Well, most of the money seems to be coming from advances of late, but she did make it last year. She brought in $443,000 in book royalties, so that's more than double, what she made last year in her Senate job.
And how does this amount in royalties plus the $4.6 million in book payments stack up to other elected leaders when they write a book or multiple books in her case?
Yeah, of any person I've looked at in the Senate, she is far and away the one who has made the most money from this. A couple interesting caveats, though, is that, well, first of all, there weren't many purchases. She didn't use campaign funds often to purchase her own book, which is something that you will frequently see done. For hers, it was about $19,000 worth of books or supporter acknowledgments that her spokesperson confirmed were, in fact, for buying her own book to give to donors. So she's not spending as much money on that regard. I think part of it is she was a name before joining the Senate, and she was a proven author, which I think certainly helps with these book sales. But they're giving her the publishers are giving her good advances. So clearly they think there's some money to be made by having her publish books. What's interesting, though, is she has a full-time job. And when a lot of journalists are writing books, they go on book leave. And I haven't seen anything about Elizabeth Warren or really any other politician going on book leave while they churn out this stuff.
I do want to touch on something you said earlier in that comment, and I want to read you your reporting, and if you could break it down a little further for us. Warren appears to have used donor funds to buy her books, albeit to a lesser extent than many fellow politicians. Is this ethical?
That is completely subjective, whether it's ethical or not. Whether it's legal or not, it depends. There's a way you can do it in that if you buy the books with your campaign funds and it's done in a way so that you don't receive any of the profit, it's okay. And typically the way the lawmakers do that is they will buy the books directly from the publisher in a way that does not give them any royalties or count towards their advance. The other option that you'll see some of them do is that they will take whatever royalties they made from it and then donate that to charity. But of course, the publisher still profits. And you've got to think when a publisher is deciding whether or not to do a book deal or how much advance to give, that's in the math, knowing that, oh, this candidate has, $100,000 that they will spend on their own book that will help us profit from it. So whether or not the lawmaker profits from that deal, maybe not directly, but it certainly could indirectly profit from buying their own books.
So is that the strategy when they're buying these books, using those donor funds, thinking, hey, I'm not going to directly make this profit, but maybe down the line I could profit in a different way?
I am yet to have a lawmaker who will confide that to me, that yes is what's going on. But it's certainly something we see often. And the other benefit of doing that is you can buy your way onto the bestseller list. The New York Times will flag on some of its lists, will flag if there are reports to bulk purchases. Ted Cruz famously landed on the bestseller list, or Jared Kushner as well was landed on the bestseller list with flagged for bulk sales. And in both of those instances, there were political committees that had purchased their books.
We've seen this pipeline in recent years of people writing a book and then they launch their presidential run. We've seen that just recently with Mike Pence amongst a handful of other GOP contenders. And we saw this with Elizabeth Warren. She has written books, obviously, and ran for president back in 2020. Did her run for presidency boost her book sales?
It's tough to tell. And we certainly have seen this with a lot of other candidates. It is a rite of passage. You run for office, you write the book. I have the Tim Pawlenty memoir unread on my bookshelf a couple feet away. With her, we don't know exactly if it boosted book sales. I don't have stats on the sales themselves. In looking at her financial disclosures, almost all of the money she's taken has been from advances, not royalties. So we really can't make a decision on that.
Is it usual for people to make most of their money in advances versus royalties?
For politicians, it depends. With the Senate, you certainly see that. Members of the House are not allowed to take royalties, or excuse me, are not allowed to take advances. They can only deal with royalties. So what you'll find a lot of newly elected congresspeople will do is that in between their election and getting sworn in, they will write a book deal. They will get a book deal. I think Cori Bush, Ronnie Jackson, I think both did that. And that way they were able to get advances. So if you're in the House, you're only dealing with royalties. But senators, yeah, they're getting advances.
Is there a reason why those rules are different depending on if you're in Congress versus the Senate?
My best guess is that it had to do with the book scandal with former Speaker Jim Wright back in the day. That there was a big to-do about books in the House that for whatever reason didn't cross over to the Senate. I'm speculating. I'm educated guess on there.
Well, Zach Everson, we appreciate your reporting and your educated guesses. Thank you so much for joining me.